Hello there, Incarnation. My name is Elaine Pendergrass, and I am your off-site children's director as you all begin the new, exciting moment of starting Children's Chapel at Incarnation. Let me tell you just a little bit about me, and then we'll get started with our training. I actually live in Kansas. I know that's far away, but I used to live in North Carolina. I went to school at Gardner-Webb University. You may know where that is. My husband and I have been married 19 years. We have 2 children. Hayden is almost 14, will be entering high school, and Julia is 11 and she'll be entering middle school. So I've been an educator, I've been in children's ministry, I've done consulting, and my heart is really with children, equipping people to work with children, and especially parents to work with their children. So I'm honored to work with you and to train you all today, even though I'm off-site. I look forward to giving you some information, and know that I am a resource. If you have questions or needs or anything, I'll be glad to give you all that information so that you can contact me. So why are we here today? Well, Matthew 18, I think, says it best. So let me read to you from the Bible. It says, Jesus called a little child to him and put the child among them. Then he said, I tell you the truth, unless you turn from your sins and become like these children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So anyone who becomes as humble as this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And anyone who welcomes a little child like this on my behalf is welcoming me. And then he goes on to say, but if you cause them to stumble, you might as well get thrown in the lake with a millstone on your neck. So I think Jesus took very seriously the value of children, the comparison of them even to the ones that actually understand the kingdom of God. I think a lot of that has to do with how children depend on their families, if it's a healthy family, completely, and how we should depend completely on God as well. So that's why we're here. We're here because we're working with one of the most valued assets, if not the most valued asset in the kingdom of God, and that is children. And we have the chance and the opportunity and the calling to work with them and tell them about Jesus. What an honor that is. So that's why we're here today. When we work with children, we get to experience a ripple effect at times. Maybe you've seen this happen. You tell a child something, you tell them a story, it's like dropping a pebble in the water. And then that child goes home and tells a brother or sister, and that circle in the water increases. And that person tells someone else, and it increases and it increases and it increases more and more, and it's a ripple effect. Our job primarily is to work with children and those that care for the children, but then from there we get the chance to see them share it with others, and that should be part of our goal in working with children. So that's why we do what we do. Keep in mind some of these things. We get to work with these children about 1 hour per week, and that's not very much. When you think about how many hours are in a day, 24 hours in a day, we get them 1 hour per week. Children that go to school, the school-age children are at school probably 7 hours a day. That might not even include their before school or their after school activities. Probably doesn't include their extracurricular activities like soccer, dance, whatever else they do. And then it certainly doesn't calculate for the time that they spend on electronics, whether it's on a phone, a tablet, a computer, watching something on television. But that often takes 7 hours or more of each child's day. So the time that we have with children is so little and so precious, we need to make the most of it. And that's why I'm training you today. That's why you're gathered at this event, so that we can be on the same page together to learn what are the most effective tools that we can use when we work with little ones. This generation, some of the children in this generation don't even have a name yet. You know, many of you may be baby boomers. I'm Generation X. Some of you may be millennials, and we have these generations that we have characteristics about. Back in the day, those generation characteristics were pretty cut out. Now they're becoming more difficult for people who study the characteristics of generations, even to give an age cutoff, because a lot of these characteristics overlap. And so you hear a lot about millennials, but really this generation that we get the privilege of working with now is the next generation, and then the following generation. This particular one has several names. It can be called Generation Z, it can be called iGen, it can be called 911 Gen, because they went through the 9/11 tragedy, some of them did. But many of the children in this group were born between 1995 and 2012. That's a typical gathering of what the ages are. These kids, and many of them are now growing into adulthood, are looking for immediate gratification because that's what they get. They want to know something, they ask Siri. They want to know something, they ask Alexa. They want to know something, they look it up. It's immediate gratification. They have busy schedules. As I mentioned, they're in school. They have their extracurricular activities. Many go to church. Some go to church. All the different things that are going on, they're pretty busy children. Not as much time just for play like you or I might have had growing up. They're often overstimulated. It's not uncommon to see a child with a TV on a phone, doing those things simultaneously. It's not uncommon these days to go out to dinner and see parents put a cell phone in front of their preschool or even an infant to keep the child busy while the conversation is going on, and children have come to expect that. They're media savvy. A lot of these kids can tell us how to fix things, and they can tell us how to search things and how to do things that we may or may not know how to do. And as I mentioned, the next generation after that, born after 2012, so our youngest, but they don't even have a name yet. There's not enough information to gather, and they've not grown up enough to know, but we can see that some of these characteristics certainly will kind of travel along with them. We need to make sure that when we're working with children that we remember that they're constantly entertained through media primarily, that they do require and they're used to immediate gratification. And these are things that we can consider when we teach them and when we work with them each week. Let's talk about some age level characteristics, and I'm checking out my notes as we speak. Preschoolers, I would call those anywhere from infant all the way up through preschool. So primarily 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds is typically when they enter kindergarten, have some characteristics. Of course, these are just a few of them, but they're non-readers, so we need to keep that in mind when we're working with them. Obviously, we wouldn't bust out a Bible and show them and expect them to understand those crazy symbols that we understand. They rely on visible cues. You know, if you're talking to a baby and you do your eyes really wide or you hide, they tend to react to that. If you smile, they often smile. If you make a sad face, they may seem sad. So visible cues are really important to them, visual cues as well. They learn through play. I've heard it said by many people that work with children, in particular the Montessori community, but other communities, that say children's most valued work is play. That is their work. You know, many of us go to jobs and we have work that we get compensated for, and we have expectations. Their expectation is to play, and that's how they learn. They often copy us when they play, good, bad, and ugly, and they learn how things work. They build their fine motor skills, these little finger skills, as they play, and they will learn how things fit together. They learn how children react to them, good and bad. They test boundaries, and that's how children this age learn. They understand concrete things. What I mean by that is if we talk about, oh, God's love is so wonderful, they may not understand that, but they do understand that a heart, for example, means love. They might not understand what love actually means. Maybe that means they have a fond feeling towards someone, but they understand representations. And so we can really keep that in mind when we work with children, that visual cues are so important with them. And any concrete objects we can use are very important. And I'll allude to that more later. Also, these children love to tell you their stories. If you ever ask them, do you have a question? They're going to, if they know to do this, raise their hand. And the question is probably not a question. It's more of a statement or a story. They love to come in. Sometimes they'll come in and flood you with what they did that week, what they had for breakfast, who they spent time with, who they got to see. And it might be a current, recent story. It might have happened a while ago because their understanding of time is different than ours. They generally trust adults. And so unless a child has had difficult experiences, you can almost guarantee that children will trust you and listen to you because you're a grown-up. So that's some preschool children characteristics. Young elementary children, so kindergarten, first grade, maybe even second grade children, are early readers. They can decipher some of those codes that we have called letters and numbers and how they work together to make sounds and words and sentences and things like that. They love stories, for you to tell them a story. Now, they see stories in action via videos a whole lot. They hear stories a lot these days on social media, particularly on YouTube. They're watching videos of people who are telling them stories, whether it's how to do something or something that happened. If you ever watch the Disney Channel or any shows like that, it's cartoons, all are stories. So the better storytellers we can be, the better that they may learn those stories. They are also concrete learners, but they're moving toward abstract. So we can begin to kind of decipher what they know concrete-wise, and also we can start to bridge them to learn what more abstract things mean. often through telling them things that are concrete or showing them things that are concrete. Their experiences really matter. So whereas the little one's going to come and tell you stories, young elementary children want to connect those stories, and they're able to connect those stories in their real life, their experiences, with what we're talking about. So anytime you can offer a little bit of time for them to share, maybe at the end, or maybe ask them questions throughout that reminds them of something that they've done, that can be really productive. And then we move on to older elementary children. These children can be more of a challenge to get to know. They're becoming preteens. They are learning more on their own. They're generally pretty proficient readers. They understand abstract things pretty well. They're motivated by their peers for good and for bad. And we have to build trust with this group. So it goes a long way for us to learn the things that they're into individually, and then as a group. What shows do they watch? What things who are they following on YouTube? What social media are they using? What activities are they in? What are they interested in? And the way that we find out is the little time that we have to talk in between seeing the children when they first arrive or when they leave. When we have game time, we can talk about these things, and we need to kind of get to know the kids more so they build their trust with us. And we can also share more about ourselves. Let's move on a little bit more and talk about order and predictability. Now, some people need more order in their lives and some don't. I had a friend one time who had very disorganized life. When you looked at her dorm room and you looked at her car and things like that, you would see a lot of disorder. She had to search for things, could never find things, but she had one drawer of socks and other items that was very organized, way more than I would organize it, because all of us need some order in our lives. In particular, with children, they need order. They need predictability. They need routines. Many families have bedtime routines. They read this many books. They do bath time after that. They brush their teeth. Whatever it is. But that order and predictability makes children feel safe because they know what's coming next. Order as far as cleanliness. Although children don't say that they like it, and adults generally do, even though we don't always have clean, orderly things, it does make us feel safer. And so having that order gives us some control over our environment. So when there are toys strewn everywhere, you may have some children that have a high tolerance for messes and other children that have a very low tolerance for messes, but it will bother them to a certain degree. You may even see children naturally take things back to their homes, as I say. So it's important to remember that the more orderly it can be, not that it's sterile, but more order, then the children will feel more comfortable and safer. So it's okay to stop in the middle of a playtime and sing the cleanup song, or say we're going to take a couple minutes to tidy up, and then get it back together, and then we'll play a little bit more, because we want to make sure everybody can have what they need and feel comfortable as well. Explanations are important for this age group. Why is a big question, especially preschoolers. They start to ask, why? Well, it's because they're trying to figure out the world. They're trying to see how things work, and we can provide those answers. Now, sometimes they may ask us questions we don't know the answer to, and it's okay to say, I don't know. I'll try to find out. But anytime that we can answer a question even before the why is asked, that's awesome, because then we can help answer those questions for them and give them a little more clarity. So why is a valid question. We all want to always make sure that our environment, again, is safe and secure. You all have participated in safeguarding God's children, and it's important to follow those guidelines. There are always good guidelines. We want to make sure that our people, our volunteers and families, feel safe with the children left in our care. We want to do the things that we're asked to do. We want to live above reproach, as the Bible says. We want to make sure that we're doing things that are safe for children. That includes the area that we're in, the things that we're doing and saying, how we speak and act toward the children. So safeguarding God's children, be sure to follow those guidelines that I know you've already experienced. Then we want to make sure that the classroom is appropriate, that it's age appropriate for one thing. Sometimes we have a few classrooms at the church where I work. I'm in the infant classroom right now. But this classroom has some toys that are appropriate for little ones, preschoolers, whatever, but not for elementary kids. They might come in here and be intrigued for just a little while by some of the baby toys they might have played with, but then after that, they're done. The opposite is true as well. If I bring a little one into an elementary classroom, there might be scissors that are perfectly fine for elementary kids, but not for little ones. So we need to make sure that the place where we have our children is safe, It's child-proofed. If it's little ones, preschoolers, we have plug covers in the walls. We have all sharp objects out of their reach or even out of the room. We have cleaners way up where they can't get them or locked away in another place. All of those that seem like common sense things, but it's good to do a walk through the classroom, even on the day when you're teaching, if that's not necessarily your job, because something might have inadvertently gotten left, and you can make sure that it's safe for the children as they enter. We also want to make sure that the toys are safe and age appropriate. Sometimes, unfortunately, toys get donated to churches and places and they're not in the best condition. If they're not, it's okay to pitch them. If they have something sharp or something broken or it doesn't work and it's supposed to, those kind of things, it's okay to get rid of them. It is. That's my permission. But also, we want to make sure the toys are relevant. While there's some old school toys we might have played with that we love, they might not be relevant to this group, but there may be some that are. So consider that. See how the children enjoy them and see if they might be appropriate to your lesson and see if you can keep them. You want to make sure toys are clean and sanitized because parents will only leave their children in general if they feel like it's a safe and secure environment. That includes cleanliness. That includes that the orderly checkout and check-in of children is done, that everyone's background checked, and all of those things. A lot of it's done behind the scenes, but you can help with that as well. We want to also make sure that our stories are appropriate. Sometimes, even just being in a classroom with a second adult, we might talk about what we did Saturday night or what's going on in our life, but there might be little ones in the room listening. So a couple things to consider. If this child went home and shared this story that he or she heard you saying to an adult, would you be okay with that? Another thing is to think about, is it age appropriate? Can the children understand this? Let me give you an example. Of course, the crucifixion of Jesus is, the crux of our faith, the crucifixion and then the resurrection of Jesus. That's why we are Christians, because Jesus was raised from the dead. But if I'm working with a 2-year-old, they don't understand death, and they don't need to see blood and things like that in that way. The only thing they might have seen blood-wise is like a little cut. We need to keep it less gory and more about Jesus. So I might not say, like I might with elementary kids, I would not describe the process of Jesus' crucifixion. I would say, however, that Jesus, when we're talking about during Lent and things like this, that Jesus gave his body or gave his life on the cross, and that when his body wasn't alive anymore, it went into the tomb. And then he was raised back to new life. I didn't have to talk about guts and gore and blood, although I know what really happened. And as children get older, I would explain it to them in more age-appropriate ways. But we need to we can give kids what they understand right now and then elaborate as they get older. It makes the story become even more fresh and new as well to them. So be age-appropriate. When in doubt, don't. And then discipline. Nobody enjoys discipline, I would say. We all, though, are required to be self-disciplined, right? We have to have the self-discipline to get up in the morning to go to work, the self-discipline to take a shower, brush our teeth, the self-discipline to eat healthily, and all the things that we do. That discipline is not a negative connotation, although sometimes it feels like that. Discipline is different than punishment. Discipline is having certain regular habits to make sure that you're growing appropriately. So when you have issues in the classroom with children not behaving appropriately, there are some things you can do. It is unfortunate if one child or a few children become the object of you and your attention, and the other children are left out just, because those kids are getting a negative attention. So we want to make sure we can stop the negative happening before we have other things happen. We want to keep it all appropriate and keep it so we can continue to learn in that hour that we have. So redirection is one thing you can do. So let's say that a child is playing with a toy and arguing with another toy with another child. We can try to introduce a new toy. We can try to bring one child into another activity, things like that. Nobody even has to get fussed at for that. We can invite children to lead or to help us with different activities. Children typically enjoy doing that. If you give them a leadership role, it gives them a purpose, and they may stop that behavior that they're doing. Give a child time to think. We might call this time out. We might call it, take a few minutes to think by yourself, maybe remove the child from the group, but that's okay to do if the behavior continues. Be sure to give warnings ahead of time and things like that, and to talk to the child privately. You never want to embarrass a child. And then keep parents in the loop. When a parent comes to pick up a child, you want to be sure to tell the parent something good, and then what happened, and then maybe something else good. That's called the sandwich or the Oreo method. But you want to remember that you're talking to that person who this child is their baby. So if you say little Johnny was awful today, he wanted to hit everybody, he was throwing toys. Ugh, do you think they want to bring that child back? No way. But if you say, "What, you know what, Mom? Today Johnny had a little trouble. He was a little difficult with his hands. He wasn't being very kind, but we talked about it. He apologized, and I'm sure next week's going to be a lot better. But would you talk with him about it at home?" That gives a scenario where the parent knows that we love their child, that we care about their child, that we understand discipline, how it works, and that we didn't keep them in that bad child label. We allowed the child to move on. That's much more healthy. So once we have all those things ready, then how do we do this teaching of children? Well, at Incarnation, you're going to be doing a children's chapel model where the children come and do activities and things. They do chapel, and then they join their parents in the regular service. But how do we do that? So let's kind of role play it out. Let's say the child is coming to us. How do we do this at first? How do we do the hello? Well, we want to greet warmly. We want to introduce ourselves. I would say, hi, I'm Miss Elaine. What's your name? I often even speak to the child first. I often get down on the child's level and say, "Hey, what's your name? My name's Miss Elaine." And then ask the child's name. He or she might be shy, and that's okay. If the child is shy, ask the parent the child's name. And then be sure to introduce yourself to the parent as well. Comment on something about the child. This is all about building relationships. So, "Hey, I like your shirt. I love Elmo too. He's really fun." Or, "Oh man, look at Lightning McQueen. He's so fast." Comment on the child's eye color. Maybe guess how old the child is. Take just a couple of minutes to talk to that family to get to know that child and a little bit about him or her. And then ensure the family, as they leave, once they followed the procedures for drop-off that are required at Incarnation, remind the parent that you'll take good care of little so-and-so, whatever his or her name is. Be sure to use the child's name a couple of times. That will help you remember the name. It'll also let them know that their child has an identity in this classroom. He's not just a number. The Bible. When we use the Bible, and we'll use mainly gospel readings for Incarnation, I'll be helping with the lesson writing for this. We will talk about the Bible, and we want the Bible to be known as truth. So oftentimes when I'm working with little ones or even with bigger kids, I would use a Bible. This one happens to be my favorite Bible storybook for early readers. I think it's backwards to you, but you can pick a Bible. This is called a picture Bible. Guess why? It has pictures. But whenever I talk about a Bible story, whether or not it's in this particular Bible, I hold a Bible because I want the children to know I didn't make this stuff up. God inspired people to put it down on paper or papyrus or scroll, whatever. And same for older kids. This is the hands-on Bible. When I use the Bible with them, I hold the Bible, I find it, I have the children find the passage. So whenever you can do that, please do that. We want to talk about, and this is okay, we say it again and again each time, this story is from the Bible. The Bible is a very special book. It's not a fairy tale like some stories you might know, like Cinderella or The Lion King, or let's get a little bit newer. What's a common movie? The Incredibles 2. It's different than that. It's a true story. And even though some of those stories are fun, they didn't really happen. But these stories really happen, and God told them to us. So hold to it, refer to it, and use kid-friendly versions. It's okay to have your own Bible on your lap, absolutely. But when you're reading, you probably want to refrain from using words that would be really unknown to the children, like thee and thou and things like that, because they don't talk like that. We want to be relevant to them. Some great versions to use with older children. The English Standard Version, that's actually the version that I typically use for myself. There's also the New International Reader's Version. It's the NIV, which you may be familiar with, New International Version, but it's a reader's version, which means it's technically written on a 4th grade level. It doesn't sound like that when you read it, but it sounds much more readable. Some people like to use the Message or Common English Standard, Common English Version Bibles. Those are okay unless you're doing word studies and things like that, because that's not always accurate, because it's a conglomeration of the stories. It's not looking at specific word-to-word translations. It's looking at what is the meaning of the story. But with children, those kinds of versions are good to use. Let's talk about learning styles. People learn in different ways, and you may have heard this before and you may have not heard this before, but we learn in various ways. Some of us have favorite learning styles. Some of us learn more through audio, through listening. Those of you that are audio people, you are listening to podcasts, you're listening to books on your audio device on your phone or whatever. You learn by hearing. You learn songs, conversations you remember. So read alouds and things like that are good for you. If I were to just read the scripture aloud. Others of you learn visually. You learn by seeing. So you may be watching my facial expressions and how I move my hands and the things that I'll show you later. That's how you learn. You like photos, you like videos, you like maps, and you like drawings and graphics and things like that. Those are visual learners. And then we have kinesthetic learners. This tends to be my favorite style. But kinesthetic people learn by doing. So if they're learning how to wire something electrical, then they would want to maybe not just read a manual, they would want to actually do it. And you hope that your electricians have done that, right? They learn like a lot of times through games and through models and through acting out and things like that, acting out activities or dramas. But you can have any combination of the three. So what we like to do when we teach children is to include all three at some point. So those that just learn by audio, you're talking, and they're singing and doing things like that. Those who learn visually, you're providing clues, you're providing visuals, and kinesthetic learners, you're letting them actively get involved. That's the best way to make sure that we help our children learn. And then we like to use what we call teachable moments. These are moments when things just come up and we can teach children. One of my passions, as I mentioned earlier, is working with parents, and I love to train parents in how to teach their children about God. In fact, I have a blog about that if you'd like more information, but it's called Teaching Kids About God. And what I like to do is find those teachable moments in real life and then write about it, giving parents an example of how to do this in real life. An example might be kids taking a bath. There are so many examples of things in the bathtub you could talk about that include water. Jesus walking on the water. Baptism, parting of the Red Sea. All these Bible stories just lend themselves beautifully to telling in the bathtub while the child's in the bathtub, or playing in the baby pool, or whatever, going to the beach. What about a life jacket? Not long ago I went to Arkansas and got to go on a lake, and we wore life jackets, and it reminded me of a few things. You wear them on a boat. Jesus was on a boat. He was with a lot of fishermen. They hold us close. They keep us safe when we're scared. And so if I'm wearing a life jacket or putting one on a child maybe who is scared at some point, I can say, hey, you know what? I realize that this might be a little bit scary, but did you know it kind of reminds me of God. He keeps us safe and close. He keeps us up above the water when we feel scared and things like that. What about seasonal changes? You get the beautiful seasonal changes in North Carolina, I know. And so you get to see the whole picture of dying to ourselves when the leaves fall and die, and then it's the dead of winter, and then spring comes back and things begin to bloom. That's a great time to talk about kind of the picture of how we are as Christians. We die to our old selves, we're raised to new life, how Jesus' body died and was raised to new life. Those are great teachable moments. And then use what they know. You've heard that saying before, right? Where people say, I need something to hang my hat on. They need kind of an example of something that they understand and relate it to that. Well, that's how people learn. We all take what we know and we build upon it. That's how our brain works. The synapses connect and connect and connect, and that's how we learn more. And so we want to remember to do that for children as well. And we can use what they know, like if I start talking about Fortnite, a game that's popular these days, or if I start talking about a certain character that they like, or something else that they're really into, they're automatically going to go, oh, I know that, and start paying more attention and get more excited about it. One thing to know about children and about adults is that repetition is good. Let me say that again. Repetition is good. It's so good for us to do things over and over. Imagine if you learned to tie your shoes and you got one shot, and that's it. Do you think you would be proficient at tying your shoes? Absolutely not. There's so many things that we learn through repetition. The more we do it, the better we get. It's important that we learn it the right way, though, and not learn the wrong way over and over. So repetition is good. Think about the things that we get to talk about that we repeat every single year in the church. We talk about Lent. We talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus. We talk about the birth of Jesus. There's so many things that we repeat, but you know what? One of the things I like to say to children too about the Bible is the Bible is living and active, right? It's God breathed, and so we can learn new things each and every time we hear a story from the Bible. And it's important that we're open to that we don't have that mindset that a lot of adults have too, I hate to say. But that mindset of, oh, I've read that story before. No, we need to go, you know what, God, what are you going to teach me this time? And we need to remember that repetition, even for adults, is good. So let me give you a few examples of why repetition is good, and then I'm going to help you kind of connect that to things that the kids know and how we can include that together. So it's sort of a teachable moment / repetition / object scenario, so it fits in with learning styles, and let's see if you kind of get what I mean. So let's think about Christmas. When I'm talking about Christmas with children, one of the things I certainly like to talk about is birthdays. Why is that? Well, we're celebrating the birthday of Jesus, and I keep it strictly to that. If they bring up Santa or whatever, the elf on the shelf and all those kind of things, I say, oh, that's fun, but we're talking about Jesus right now. Let them do that at home. We only have 1 hour. So talk about birthdays. Well, what do kids think of when they think birthdays? They think presents. They think cake or cupcakes. They think candles, birthday hats, all those things that go along with birthdays. Children understand. So anytime you can incorporate those into a lesson, do it. One of the things I brought today, a prop for you, is a little baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. I actually swaddled this baby like I learned to do when my children were babies, the proper swaddling way. And you can do the same. But I just grabbed a baby doll, wrapped it up in swaddling clothes, and I would explain to the children that means the baby was just wrapped up. While I'm teaching the story, I might even hold baby Jesus and rock him. They get that. I might choose my little friend who's got his hands on his friends to hold baby Jesus for a few minutes and to get that privilege. And you can do the same. So use those teachable moments like that. Balloons are fun to use at Christmas as well. Give them a little cupcake for their snack. Just think about how it all relates. What can you draw in that builds on what children already know and helps them to understand the story of Jesus's birthday at Christmas even better? Let's talk about the story of the wise man building his house upon the rock in the Gospels. It talks about how the one that was wise is the one that listened to what Jesus said and did it, right? And so when I'm talking about the wise man building his house upon the rock, trying to find my prop, the rock. I have a rock, and of course there's a song that goes along with that. Anytime you can include music, that's fun too. You may know it. I'll sing a little bit. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came tumbling down. Do you know that song? If you don't, look it up. So if you're telling that story, bring a rock or go on a search to find a rock outside. And then, of course, you can include things that stack like blocks. I'll build a little, my house must not have been built on a strong foundation. It wasn't because my legs were crooked. They're not a flat foundation. Let me do it on my table right here. So I can build a stack of something that you can see. I built a strong foundation, but at first this was on a flat table, so that made it more strong, like building it on the foundation of Jesus, listening and doing what Jesus said. That's like the wise man. The foolish man, however, built his house on the sand, and his house went splat. That's their favorite part of the song. And so I might include sand play in that.